So we're diving into this mountain of research on motivation you've brought,
Okay.
specifically how to hack productivity. Looks like we're going deep on achievement motivation. Seen some big names here like McClelland, Atkinson. I got to admit, I'm already kind of fascinated by this whole concept of implicit motives. You know, those unconscious drivers that
Yeah.
can really throw a wrench in our plans, right?
Yeah, it's a really fascinating area. We set those conscious goals, but sometimes really struggle to actually, follow through with them. And it turns out those hidden motives can play a big role in explaining that disconnect sometimes. Like maybe you consciously want to excel in a particular area, but deep down you're terrified of failure. That fear can really,
Right.
become a roadblock.
Right. Okay, so how do we even start to uncover those motives? It's not like we can just, interview our subconscious.
Yeah.
Well, researchers have developed some pretty clever methods to try to tap into those deeper desires. One classic method is the thematic apperception test, or the T8. It involves showing people ambiguous pictures and asking them to tell stories about what they're seeing. The idea is that the themes and needs that emerge in those stories, they reflect their underlying motives.
So if someone consistently tells stories about, like, characters striving for success or excellence or something like that, that suggests a strong implicit achievement motive. But what's the connection between these stories and, like, real-world productivity?
Yeah, that's where the research gets really, really interesting. McClelland and colleagues, they did those really groundbreaking studies where they actually they aroused the achievement motivation of participants, and then they measured their performance on a whole bunch of different tasks. What they found was really fascinating. As arousal increased, the strength of that achievement motive, it also increased. And this, in turn, actually predicted, how well they performed.
So it's almost like this chain reaction, right? Increased arousal sparks that desire to achieve,
Mhm.
which then leads to more effort and better results. But hold on, you mentioned that Tate isn't the only way to measure achievement motivation. What are some of the other approaches?
Right. You also have questionnaires that directly ask people about their desire for success, their fear of failure. But here's the catch. The scores from those questionnaires, they don't always match up with what you see in the TAT results. So someone might score high on a questionnaire saying, yeah, I really want to achieve, but then their TAT results tell a very different story, maybe hinting at, a deeper fear of failure that they're not even consciously aware of.
Wow, that's yeah, it's a bit of a head scratcher. So which measure is the better predictor of someone's actual behavior? I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to figure out how to actually get things done.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? And it really highlights why just setting goals isn't always enough. We need to dig a little bit deeper and try to understand, those unconscious drivers that might be running the show, so to speak, behind the scenes.
Okay, so let's say I'm starting to think, all right, this is all pretty interesting, but how does this actually help me be more productive? Like, what are some practical takeaways that I can start applying to my own life, like right now?
Well, I'd say the first step is really just awareness. Just recognizing that you have these implicit motives and that they might not always be perfectly aligned with your conscious goals. That in itself is huge. And then the question becomes, okay, so how do I work with these hidden forces instead of against them? And that's where it gets really, really interesting. There's no one size fits all answer, but there are some research backed strategies that can help.
Okay, hit me. I'm ready to start hacking my motivation.
So for those who are driven by a fear of failure, a key strategy is to reframe how they view challenges. So instead of seeing them as threats, it's about shifting that perspective to see them as opportunities to learn, to grow.
I love that. It's like turning that fear into fuel.
Precisely. And research has shown that focusing on mastery, developing those skills and knowledge, it can be a really powerful way to tap into that achievement motive, even for those who tend to be more fear-driven.
So it's about kind of aligning those goals with your deeper motives. If you're naturally drawn to like mastering a skill, set goals that emphasize, learning, growth, rather than just outcomes, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense. But what about those people who are like constantly planning but never seem to take action? I know a few of those.
Ah, yes. That brings us to another fascinating area of research, which is understanding individual differences in self-regulation. So some people are naturally, action-oriented, while others tend to get stuck in a cycle of, overthinking and analysis. And for those folks, the key is to find strategies that help them bridge the gap between intention and action. So breaking down, large goals into smaller, more manageable steps, setting clear deadlines, even just visualizing themselves taking action, these can be incredibly effective.
Yeah, it's like giving your brain a clear roadmap so it doesn't get lost in the weeds.
Exactly. There's also research on something called implementation intentions, which shows that forming these concrete if-then plans, like, if it's 8 a.m. and then I'll sit down and write for an hour, can significantly increase the chances of actually achieving those goals.
This makes me think about how even our physical environment can play a role. Like if I want to write, having a dedicated workspace set up ready to go makes it so much easier to get started. It's like removing those little barriers to action.
That's a fantastic point. It highlights the importance of understanding the whole context of motivation. It's not just about, willpower or mindset. It's about creating an environment that supports your goals.
Right, which reminds me of something we touched on earlier, attributions, or how we explain our successes and failures. How does that factor into all of this?
Attributions are absolutely crucial. How you explain your past performance, whether you attribute it to internal factors like, effort or ability, or external factors like luck or the difficulty of a task, it can profoundly influence your future expectations and motivation. For example, if you believe your success was simply due to luck, you're probably not going to be as motivated to put in the same effort next time. On the flip side, if you attribute a failure to something internal and stable, like, a lack of ability,
Yeah.
that can be really damaging to your self-esteem and your future motivation.
So the key takeaway here is to be mindful of the stories we tell ourselves about our successes and failures.
Exactly. Cultivating a more empowering attribution style, one that recognizes the role of effort in learning, even in the face of, setbacks, that can be a real game changer for your motivation.
This has been incredibly insightful. We've covered a lot of ground already, from those hidden motives to goal setting, self-regulation, and even the stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
But there's one element we haven't really talked about yet, and that's the role of emotions. How do feelings of frustration, anxiety, or even boredom, how do those factor into all of this?
Ah, yes. Emotions are, they're inextricably linked to motivation. We talked about how anticipating positive feelings can drive us towards a goal, but what about when those feelings are negative? How do we work with those?
It's a great question because let's be honest, those negative emotions are often what would derail our best intentions.
Absolutely. And that's where strategies like emotional regulation become really, really crucial. It's about developing the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our emotional responses, especially in those challenging situations.
So instead of letting those feelings, overwhelm us and lead to procrastination or just, giving up, we can learn to acknowledge them, process them, and then choose a more constructive response. But how do we actually do that?
There are a variety of techniques that can help, everything from mindfulness and meditation to cognitive reframing, and even simple things like taking a break or engaging in physical activity. The key is to find what works best for you as an individual.
Yeah. I started to realize that motivation isn't just this single thing. It's a whole system of interacting factors, our thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and even our biology. It's a lot more complex than I initially thought.
It's a complex and dynamic system, and that's what makes it so fascinating to study. And by understanding, how those different pieces fit together, we can start to unlock our own potential for consistent productivity and achievement.
My brain is definitely buzzing with ideas right now. Before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, is there one key takeaway you'd want to leave our listener with?
I'd say this. Recognize that your motivation is influenced by a combination of conscious goals and unconscious motives. Pay attention to both. If you're struggling to achieve a goal, explore whether there might be a hidden motive working against you, and don't underestimate the power of experimentation. It's a bit like treating motivation as a science experiment, trying different approaches and seeing what works best for you.
Yeah, I like that. A motivation lab right in our own lives. It makes me think about this whole debate around rewards. Do they actually help or hurt motivation? I feel like I've heard arguments on both sides.
Yeah, it's a question that sparked a ton of research. One of the classic studies was actually done back in the 1970s. Participants worked on a puzzle, and some of them got rewarded for finishing it, while others didn't. And surprisingly, the ones who got the reward were actually less likely to keep working on the puzzle in their free time compared to the ones who didn't get a reward.
So it almost seems like the reward backfired and actually decreased, like
Yeah.
their intrinsic motivation to work on the puzzle, right?
Yeah, that was the initial interpretation, and it led to this idea of the overjustification effect, which is basically that external rewards can sometimes undermine our internal drive to do something simply because we enjoy it.
But wait a minute, don't we hear all the time about how important rewards and incentives are for motivation, like bonuses at work, or even just that little hit of satisfaction when we, check something off our to-do list?
Right, you bring up a really good point. It's definitely not that straightforward. More recent research has actually shown that the relationship between rewards and motivation is a lot more nuanced. It turns out rewards don't always have a negative impact on intrinsic motivation. In some cases, they can actually enhance it.
Okay, so what's the key here? Like, when do rewards work in our favor, and when do they, backfire?
Well, one factor seems to be the type of reward. Rewards that are seen as controlling, like those that are just given for completing a task, regardless of the quality, those tend to have a more negative impact on intrinsic motivation.
Yeah, it's like saying, just get it done. I don't care how.
Yeah.
Not exactly uh, inspiring. Yeah.
Exactly. But rewards that are seen as more informational, those that provide feedback on your, competence or your progress, those can actually boost intrinsic motivation.
Oh, so it's more like, hey, you're getting really good at this. That type of feedback can definitely be motivating.
Absolutely. It speaks to our innate desire to learn and grow. And this is where it gets really interesting. Research suggests that aligning rewards with those, implicit motives can be incredibly powerful.
So if someone has like a really strong implicit achievement motive, rewards that acknowledge their competence and progress are going to be a lot more effective than rewards that just focus on, checking a box.
Exactly. It's all about understanding what truly drives someone and tailoring the rewards accordingly. Now, going back to that overjustification effect for a moment, another important factor is the person's initial interest in the activity. If they weren't really into it to begin with, a reward isn't going to magically change that.
Yeah, so no amount of external incentives is going to make you fall in love with a task that you find inherently boring.
Right. A reward might provide a temporary boost in those cases, but it's unlikely to create any kind of lasting intrinsic motivation. The real magic happens when we can, tap into those internal drivers, those implicit motives that really fuel our passion and our persistence.
Yeah, that makes me think about the concept of flow. That feeling of being completely absorbed and energized by an activity.
Ah, yes. Flow is a fascinating phenomenon that's closely tied to intrinsic motivation. In fact, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who really pioneered the research on flow, described it as the ultimate expression of intrinsic motivation.
So what are the ingredients that go into creating that flow state?
Well, Csikszentmihalyi actually identified several key factors. First, a clear goal is essential, along with immediate feedback on your, progress. There also needs to be a balance between challenge and skill, where the activity is demanding enough to engage you fully, but not so difficult that you feel overwhelmed. And finally, a sense of control over the activity is really crucial.
It's like everything just kind of clicks into place, and you lose yourself in the moment.
Exactly. And one of the hallmarks of flow is a distorted sense of time.
Right.
You might spend hours engrossed in an activity that feels like minutes.
Oh, I can definitely relate to that. Whether I'm, writing, working on a creative project, or even having a really engaging conversation, sometimes I completely lose track of time.
Yeah, that's the power of flow in action. And what's fascinating is that research has found a strong connection between those flow states and optimal performance.
It's like when you're in flow, you're able to access your full potential.
Precisely. You're completely present, focused, and engaged. And this has led to a lot of interest in using those flow principles to boost motivation and performance in various settings, from education and work to even athletics.
So how can we practically apply those flow principles to our everyday lives?
Well, the first step is to identify activities that have the potential to trigger, flow for you. And these are often activities that you find inherently enjoyable, that challenge you just enough without being overwhelming, and that provide you with a sense of progress and mastery.
Yeah, it's like finding that sweet spot where your skills and the demands of the activity are kind of in perfect harmony.
Exactly. Once you've identified those activities, you can start to, create conditions that foster flow, and that might mean setting clear goals for the activity, minimizing distractions and making sure that you have dedicated time to fully engage.
It sounds like creating a sort of flow ritual.
I love that. A flow ritual. And another interesting aspect of flow is that it often emerges when we're engaged in activities that align with, our values and our purpose.
Oh, so it's not just about finding activities that are challenging and engaging, but also making sure those activities have meaning and significance to us.
That's a great point. And it brings us back to the importance of understanding those implicit motives. When our activities are in sync with our core values and those drivers, we're much more likely to experience flow, to feel motivated, and to have a greater sense of fulfillment.
This is really making me see how all the pieces of this motivation puzzle fit together. It's like a symphony with those implicit motives, explicit goals, rewards, emotions, flow, and even our values all playing a part.
Yeah, it's a beautiful and complex system. And the more we understand how it works, the better equipped we are to create a life filled with purpose, with passion, and with consistent productivity.
Before we wrap things up, I have one final question for you.
I'm all ears.
We were talking about how even visualizing achieving a goal can trigger that release of testosterone, that hormone that's linked to drive and motivation.
Yeah.
What if we could actually like harness that biological response as a productivity hack?
That's a really intriguing idea, and it taps into this growing area of research on the power of visualization, mental imagery.
So instead of just like setting a goal and hoping for the best, we could actively use visualization to kind of prepare our minds for action.
Exactly, and it goes beyond just simply picturing yourself reaching the finish line. Imagine yourself navigating the challenges along the way, the potential obstacles, the setbacks.
It's like creating a mental rehearsal for success,
Mhm.
anticipating those roadblocks and coming up with strategies to overcome them.
Precisely. And research suggests that by repeatedly engaging in this type of mental imagery, we can actually strengthen the neural pathways that are associated with the motivation and goal attainment.
That's incredible. It's like we have uh, this untapped potential within our own minds to really influence our drive and behavior.
And the best part is this power is available to everyone, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't require any special equipment or training, just a willingness to experiment, to explore.
This is what I find so inspiring about diving into the science of motivation. It shows us that we're not just these passive passengers along for the ride. We have the ability to understand our drives, to work with them, and ultimately to shape our own destinies.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that's a perfect note to end our deep dive on.
It has been a fascinating journey. So, to our listener, we hope this exploration has sparked some new insights and given you some practical tools to hack your own productivity and motivation. Remember, it's all about self-discovery. Be patient with yourself, experiment with different approaches, and most importantly, enjoy the process.